What you are about to hear is not fiction. These are 10 real accounts, submitted by real people of the most terrifying moments of their lives. A nurse watched something walk out of a patient's room, hours after that patient had been pronounced dead. A solo hiker found a journal buried in the wilderness that described his exact route, dated 3 weeks into the future. A family on vacation discovered their Airbnb host had never actually left the property. These are not campfire tales. These are real horror stories, raw, unfiltered, and completely true. If you think you're safe right now, sitting wherever you are, I want you to think again. Because every single person in these stories thought the same thing. They thought nothing bad could ever happen to them. They were wrong. My name is Whisper, and this is True Terraphiles Official, your #1 source for the most bone-chilling true accounts ever documented. Tonight, we are counting down 10 of the most disturbing real horror stories we have ever received, and I promise you, by the time we reach #1, you will not want to be alone. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a single upload, and if you are brave enough, drop a comment and tell me which story haunted you the most. Turn off the lights if you dare. Let us begin. Marcus had worked the overnight shift at St. Dominic's General Hospital for 11 years. And in all that time, nothing had ever rattled him. Not the moaning, not the machines, not the smell of disinfectant masking something worse beneath it. He was the kind of nurse who had seen it all and filed it away neatly into that part of the brain built for survival. On the night of November 14th, something broke that wall permanently. His patient in room 112, an elderly man named Gerald, admitted for severe cardiac failure, had been officially pronounced dead at 11:47 p.m. The body had been left in the room pending transport. A normal procedure, nothing unusual. Marcus had documented it himself, sealed the chart, notified the family. He stepped out to complete his rounds, checked on for other patients, refilled medications, updated charts, routine, mechanical, ordinary. It was just after 3 a.m. when he passed room 112 again and noticed the door was slightly open. He remembered closing it. He pushed it open slowly, expecting to find a confused, orderly, or perhaps a drafty window, and instead, he saw the silhouette of a man sitting upright on the edge of the hospital bed. Not lying down, sitting upright, in the dark. Marcus reached for the light switch with a hand that had already gone cold, and when the fluorescent lights buzzed on, the bed was empty. The sheets were disturbed, not the way they had been when he left, when Gerald's body had been lying flat and still, but rather the way sheets look when someone has been sitting on the edge and has just stood up. The pillow was compressed on one side, as if a head had rested there after the official death. The window was locked from the inside. The room had no other exit. Marcus stood in that doorway for what felt like 4 minutes, although the security footage later showed it was closer to 30 seconds, staring at a bed that should have held a corpse, and instead held nothing but the unmistakable, impossible impression of someone who had just been there. He filed an incident report. His supervisor chalked it up to exhaustion. But Marcus quit 2 weeks later, and he has not worked nights since. Daniel was an experienced backcountry hiker, 34 years old. Fit, methodical, the kind of person who filed detailed trail plans with a friend before every solo trip into the wilderness. He had been hiking the Whitaker Ridge Backcountry Trail in northern Montana for 4 days when he spotted something half-buried. Beneath a pile of dead leaves and pine needles about 30 meters off the marked path, it was a journal, a battered, weathered, dark green composition notebook with no name on the cover. The pages swollen and warped with moisture but still readable. Curious. He sat down on a fallen log and began flipping through it. The early pages appeared to be a standard hiking log: trail conditions, weather notes, mileage estimates, campsite locations. Normal enough. What was not normal was when Daniel reached an entry dated 3 weeks in the future and began reading a description of a campsite that was an exact word-for-word match for the campsite he had set up the previous night. The coordinates were written out in precise notation. The description mentioned his orange tent. It mentioned the particular arrangement of stones he had used to build his fire ring. It mentioned the sound of the creek to the east and the way one particular pine tree had split at the trunk and formed a natural arch over the trail. Then it described, in calm and measured handwriting, a set of footprints that appeared each morning just outside the tent, too large to be Daniel's, too fresh to have been there before he arrived, and a sound heard on the third night that the writer described only as not an animal. Daniel had heard that sound on his third night. He had recorded it on his phone and told himself it was a fox or a bear moving through the brush. He snapped photos of every page of the journal with shaking hands, packed up his campsite an hour before dawn, and hiked out at speed without stopping. The photos he uploaded later were genuine. To this day, the journal's author has never been identified, and the entries after his campsite description continued for 4 more days, describing a hiker who never made it back out. When the Reyes family booked the lakeside cottage through a short-term rental platform for their anniversary trip, everything seemed perfect. 5-star reviews, a charming host named Philip, professional photos of a beautifully furnished property, and a promising description that emphasized privacy and quiet. Philip had sent a warm welcome message and said he lived locally and would leave the key beneath a ceramic. It popped by the front door. Check-in was smooth. The cottage was clean and exactly as advertised, and the family settled in without a second thought. The first sign was subtle: a coffee mug in the kitchen sink that had not been there when they arrived. Clean but damp, sitting in a way that suggested it had been used and rinsed very recently. Sophia Reyes dismissed it as something she had overlooked. The second sign was less easy to dismiss. On the second morning, her 10-year-old daughter came downstairs and said she had heard someone walking in the hallway at 2 a.m. Slow, heavy footsteps passing her door twice, then silence. Sophia walked the entire cottage, checked every door and window, all locked. On the third night, Sophia's husband, Ramon, got up at midnight for water and noticed a thin strip of light beneath the door to the detached storage room at the back of the property, a door he had tried on day 1 and found locked. He knocked. The light went out immediately. He called the platform's emergency line, and they contacted Philip, who answered his phone on the second ring. Assured them everything was fine, said he must have accidentally left a light on, and would come by to check. He never showed. When local police opened the storage room the following morning, they found a sleeping bag, a camping lantern with fresh batteries, a cooler of food, and a collection of photographs of the interior of the cottage, including several taken through windows dated across a 12-month span that predated the family's booking by almost a year. Philip had been living in that room, on and off, through dozens of rental stays. Was arrested 4 days later. It was 1:15 in the morning when Priya's car began losing power on a desolate stretch of Route 9 in rural West Virginia, the fuel gauge dropping faster than it should have. The dashboard lights flickering in a way her mechanic had warned her about, but she had put off fixing for 3 weeks. The only exit in sight was marked for a gas station and nothing else. No town name. No services listed, just the universal fuel pump symbol and the number 44 on a green sign that looked older than the highway itself. She pulled off. The gas station was open barely. One working pump under a buzzing fluorescent canopy, a small convenience store with lights on inside, and a man behind the counter who looked at her when she walked in with the kind of stillness that made her immediately want to be back outside. She paid for fuel in cash, kept her eyes down, and was heading back to the pump when she noticed the second car, a sedan parked along the side of the building with its engine running, no driver visible, hazard lights blinking. She fueled up as fast as she could. When she went inside to collect her receipt, the man behind the counter leaned forward and said quietly, and without any expression, "You should lock your doors before you pull back onto the highway. Don't stop for anyone flagging you down between here and the state line, and don't look in your back seat until you've been driving for at least 10 minutes." She stared at him. He held eye contact and said nothing else. She drove away, did not look in her back seat for 13 minutes, and when she finally did, she found nothing. But when she later reviewed her dashcam footage from the fueling stop, it showed a man crouched behind her rear tire for 47 seconds before she pulled out a man in dark clothes who walked back to the sedan the moment she left. She has never been able to identify him. She found the dashcam footage entirely by accident 6 months later. She has not driven that highway since. The group of four had broken into the Hargrove State Psychiatric Institute on a Saturday night in late October, the same way every urban explorer breaks into an abandoned building, which is to say poorly prepared, overconfident, and armed with nothing but phone flashlights and the reasonable belief that the worst thing they would encounter was a fine for trespassing. Hargrove had been closed since 1993 following a series of investigations into patient treatment that the state had quietly buried in lengthy legal proceedings. The building was enormous, 5 stories, 3 wings, a basement that the group decided immediately to avoid, and it had the particular quality of silence that only comes from spaces that have absorbed decades of human suffering. They explored the first 2 floors without incident, peeling paint, scattered medical records, overturned furniture, broken windows letting in cold night air. I was in the corridor of Ward C, on the 3rd floor, that they began to hear the sound. A rhythmic scraping, slow, deliberate, consistent, coming from behind a closed door at the far end of the hallway. They stood and listened for a full minute. It did not stop. One of the group, a 22-year-old named Trevor, filmed the approach on his phone. The footage shows the 4 of them walking slowly toward the door, the scraping growing louder with every step, and then Trevor's hand reaching out and pushing the door open. The footage then shows Trevor immediately taking 12 rapid steps backward, at which point he drops the phone. The phone lands face up and continues recording the ceiling, while the sound of 4 people running can be heard getting rapidly quieter. When the footage was later enhanced, a frame-by-frame analysis showed what was in that room for the 1.3 seconds the door was open before Trevor stepped back. A figure seated in a rocking chair facing the window, moving back and forth, wearing what appeared to be a hospital gown. The building had been confirmed vacant by a security sweep 48 hours earlier. No one has offered a credible explanation for what appears in that footage. James had experienced sleep paralysis before, twice in his early 20s. Both times terrifying in the clinical, understandable way that sleep paralysis is terrifying. The sensation of weight on the chest, the inability to move, the shadow figure that the brain manufactures and presents as real. He knew the science. He was not afraid of the science. What happened on the night of March 3rd was different, and the difference became clear only in the days afterward. James woke at 3:40 a.m. to find himself unable to move, staring at the ceiling, the familiar crushing pressure on his chest telling him that this was another episode. The shadow figure was there, standing in the corner of the bedroom as it always was, a dark shape that he recognized as his own mind playing tricks. He concentrated on regulating his breathing, on reminding himself it was not real, on waiting for the paralysis to pass. After approximately 4 minutes it did. He sat up, took 3 deep breaths, reached for the glass of water on his nightstand, and found it was missing. The glass was gone. He got up, turned on the light, checked the room. The glass was on the kitchen counter, across the apartment full of water as if freshly poured. James lived alone. His front door was locked, chain engaged as he had left it. His sliding balcony door was locked. Every window was latched. He reviewed the audio on his sleep recorder, a device he ran every night due to his sleep disorder. And at 3:38 a.m., 2 minutes before he woke, the recording captured a sound. Footsteps on hardwood floor, moving from the bedroom doorway to the kitchen, then silence. His sleep recorder had not triggered a recording alert because the sound was too soft to cross the motion threshold. The glass had moved. Something had moved it, and whatever it was, it had been in the room with him while he lay paralyzed in his bed, entirely convinced it was not real. The 4 friends had reserved Campsite 9 at Redtail Lake Campground in early August, one of the more remote sites, accessible only by a short trail from the main road, surrounded by dense pine forest on 3 sides and open water on the 4th. By all accounts, it should have been a perfect long weekend. They arrived Friday evening, set up quickly, cooked over the fire, and went to sleep around midnight. It was Ryan who woke first, at approximately 2 a.m., to a sound he could not immediately identify, a soft, rhythmic knocking, like knuckles on wood, coming from somewhere just outside the tree line to the north. He lay still and listened for a while, assumed it was a woodpecker or some nocturnal animal, and went back to sleep. On Saturday night, all 4 of them heard it the same knocking, same direction, same slow, even pace, beginning at roughly 2 a.m. and continuing without variation for over an hour. Ryan got up and shone a flashlight into the trees. Nothing. On Sunday morning, their last day, Kara walked into the tree line to find a good spot for a photograph and stopped when she noticed the trees. At regular intervals every 8 to 10 feet, forming a clear line, the bark of each pine had been marked at roughly chest height. A deep horizontal scrape, fresh wood visible, running in a perfectly consistent direction that curved around the northern perimeter of their campsite in an arc. Whatever had made those marks had walked in a slow, deliberate circle around them while they slept multiple times, given the depth of some cuts, and the marks were too high and too deep to be deer. When they reported it to the campground ranger, she went quiet and then told them that Campsite 9 had been closed for 3 seasons before this year, and that she had personally recommended it be closed again after similar reports. She did not elaborate. The campsite was closed the following Monday. Helen had lived in the same house on Sycamore Drive for 9 years, and had known her neighbor, an older man named Arthur, the entire time. Arthur was retired, kept to himself, maintained his garden, waved from his porch on mornings she passed. A normal neighbor? A background figure in her daily life? The kind of person you notice only when they are gone? Which is why it took Helen 3 weeks to realize that the man she had been seeing in Arthur's yard, pruning the hedges, moving through the kitchen window in the evenings, occasionally sitting on the porch, was not Arthur. The realization came gradually, accumulating detail by detail. The figure was slightly taller, moved differently, sat still for too long in a way Arthur never had. She told herself it was a relative staying with him, a son she had never met, a nephew. She did not pursue it because it was not her business, because she valued her own privacy and extended that value to others because she was busy. She would have continued to tell herself this, likely indefinitely, if she had not run into Arthur's daughter at the pharmacy in mid-September. Arthur's daughter, who told her that her father had been living in assisted care since June, that the house had been sitting empty while she sorted out the estate, and that she had not arranged for anyone to stay there or maintain the property. Helen drove home. She sat in her car in the driveway and watched the kitchen light in Arthur's house switch on. She called the police. Officers found evidence of extended occupation, a bedroll in the spare bedroom, food in the fridge, a chair positioned directly in front of the window, facing Helen's house with a clear, unobstructed sightline to her front door, her living room window, and her driveway. The person was never identified. They were never caught. Lena and her boyfriend had been driving to a remote ski cabin rental in the mountains when the storm came in faster than the forecast predicted whiteout conditions in under 20 minutes, the road disappearing beneath a sheet of wind-packed snow before they had time to turn around. They made it to the cabin by memory and headlights, got inside, got warm, convinced themselves they were safe. The cabin was simple but solid. One main room, a small loft, a wood stove, no cell signal. The property owner had left firewood and basic supplies, and the storm was supposed to break by morning. They went to sleep listening to the wind pressing hard against the walls. When Lena woke at 4 a.m. to add wood to the stove, she looked out the front window out of habit, the kind of checking the weather reflex that kicks in during any storm, and she saw the tracks. Fresh footprints in the new fallen snow, coming from the tree line, approaching the cabin in a straight, deliberate line, stopping directly beneath the front window, and then, from the window, turning and going back the way they came. The depth was consistent. Spacing was human. They had been made since the snow stopped, which the absence of accumulation inside the impressions confirmed had been within the last 2 hours. No vehicle was visible. No other structure was visible. The nearest occupied property was 11 miles down a mountain road that was impassable in those conditions. Lena stood at that window for a very long time, looking at prints that led out of the dark, stood beneath her window while she slept, and walked back into the dark, and she could not find a single explanation that made her feel anything other than deeply, completely certain that whatever had stood there had done so deliberately. They did not sleep again. The storm broke at dawn. They left before the road was fully clear. Claire was a freelance journalist when she first heard about Pell Creek, a small unincorporated community in rural Tennessee with a population of roughly 300 people and an unusually high rate of missing persons reports relative to its size. It's not sensationally high, not the kind of number that triggers a federal investigation, but quietly, persistently elevated over a span of 27 years in a way that a sharp-eyed data analyst had flagged in a regional crime statistics database and posted about, briefly, in an online forum before deleting the post. Claire found a cached version of that post and spent 6 weeks requesting records, cross-referencing databases, and eventually driving to Pell Creek herself. The town appeared entirely ordinary. A gas station, a diner, a church, a volunteer fire department, a municipal office staffed by one woman who smiled at Claire and asked if she was lost. Claire spent 2 days there, staying at a motel on the edge of town and speaking to residents who were uniformly polite, helpful, and said precisely nothing of any substance. On her second night, she found a note slipped under her motel room door. It was handwritten on lined paper and contained a single sentence. The ones who went missing all asked the same questions you're asking. She packed her bags and drove out before sunrise. Over the following 4 months, Claire documented 14 separate missing persons cases from Pell Creek and the surrounding 5-mile radius, spanning from 1997 to the present. All adults, all outsiders, none with any criminal history, all reported missing after brief visits to the area. She submitted her findings to 2 law enforcement agencies and 1 investigative news outlet. One agency said there was insufficient evidence to open an investigation. The other did not respond. The news outlet passed on the story without explanation. Claire has been posting her documentation publicly for 2 years. The missing persons cases have not been formally investigated. Pell Creek is still there, the diner is still open, and the woman at the municipal office still smiles at strangers and asks if they are lost. And there you have it, 10 real accounts. 10 moments when ordinary people encountered something they could not explain, something that followed them, watched them, or changed them permanently. These stories were submitted to us by real people, and they stay with us for a reason, because the truth is always more terrifying than fiction. If any of these stories resonated with you, if you have your own account you have never told anyone, send it to us. Your story deserves to be heard. Subscribe to True Terror Files Official so you are the first to know when we release our next compilation. Like this video if it kept you looking over your shoulder, and sleep well tonight if you can. We will see you in the dark.